And at the moment, let's bring in our Rise international correspondent, Karl Bostic, who joins us now for the latest in Niger. Karl, it's good to have you here on Newsday today. It's now been 1 week since the deadline given by ECOWAS expired for the release and reinstatement of President Bazoum to poser. Where do things stand right now? Does the junta have the upper hand?
Well, it appears that, yes, the junta does appear to have the upper hand, and that's because of a number of factors that are out there, ranging from disarray amongst the ECOWAS bloc of countries, which is divided over the use of intervention. There is support amongst Niger's neighboring states, which are under military rule, in support of Niger. And then there's growing popular support for the junta because of economic hardships. Support that's based on anti-French resentment, the former ruler of colonial Niger. So blaming those sanctions on ECOWAS and blaming those sanctions on ECOWAS that's backed and supported by France. But in the meantime, what we have seen on the diplomatic front, a group of Islamic leaders, received permission from Nigeria's President Tinubu to go to Niger to meet with their religious counterparts in Niger. They arrived yesterday. In ECOWAS Parliamentary Committee also is receiving permission from President Tinubu to go to Niger as early as today or tomorrow. However, keep in mind that the junta has refused to meet with really anyone the past week, except for the U.S.'s number 2 official. That was Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland last week. In the opinion of many analysts, the longer this plays out, there will be less momentum for any kind of intervention, and the train has already left the station. He's less likely to be returned to power. Also, the warning being that if there is a military intervention, we're now learning that out of this meeting that the U.S. official Victoria Nuland held with a member of the junta last week, came the very stark warning that if there was any attempt to intervene militarily, President Bazoum himself would be killed. So that's the stark reality we're facing right now. If there is one, which is unlikely, now people are suggesting that it would require so much consensus and coordination, not only with ECOWAS, but also with the African Union. The African Union, in fact, they meet tomorrow to decide on this further, but also international partners. And this could just simply take months to coordinate. To go into a country that's 100 times the size of Gambia, that's the last time a country was intervened militarily. That was back in 2017. And there's just simply no force capable on standby to visit a country of that size, a country twice the size of France or size of Texas. And right now that looks increasingly unlikely. There's more concern about the safety and health of President Bazoum.
You're right, Karl. Grim realities there, no doubt. So, still talking about his health, can you bring us up to date on the president's conditions?
Well, Niger's ambassador to the U.S. in Washington, D.C. has been giving an interview, and it appears that, as you were just indicating, right now the president, his wife, and his son, they're being kept in the basement of his presidential compound. The basement, as you mentioned, is unlit. Electricity has been cut off. Yes, a doctor did visit him yesterday, bringing him some food, but it's dried rice and canned food, so they have no power or means to even cook or boil the rice, for example. There's no running water. In fact, the plea now coming from allies and supporters of Niger to the U.S. especially is not to even think about reinstating the power, just simply save his life. The real concern being that, if anything, forget about the threats of killing him. If there's military intervention, that's almost irrelevant, because if this continues any longer at the rate it is, ultimately, the ambassador is claiming that the junta simply wants to starve him to death, because there's already been significant loss of weight with the president, his son, and his wife. So that's really the concern right now, because, in the back of all of this is the fact that the president still refuses to resign. If he did agree to resign, that may change the calculus in terms of his release. But for right now, he's digging in. And yes, when you say his spirits are high, that's according to the doctor. But he also said this, he's in fine condition, quote, given the situation.
All right, Karl, is the U.S. expected to play a role in bringing this crisis to an end?
Well, the reason why all eyes are on the U.S. especially is because you saw those protests against the French embassy on the Sunday in which he was taken hostage, and you saw those protests outside the French base on Friday by nearly 1,000 people. But you've seen no protests outside the two U.S. bases because the U.S. is not seen as a colonial master. In fact, it was the U.S. official Victoria Nuland who had offered the services of the U.S. to mediate. That offer was in fact rejected, and she afterwards said that they have a plan forward, and it's not in support of the Niger constitution. And you have to also keep in mind that really a lot of people underestimated these coup leaders. They're very senior people with decades of military experience. They've been trained in the West. That's the coup leader, General Chiani himself, trained by the U.S. in the U.S., and they've also been trained in Europe. They've also served as ECOWAS peace leaders, General Chiani himself as well. So they know how to maybe deal with the situation militarily, and people really underestimated them. But the U.S., for its part, they want to perhaps keep the conversation going diplomatically because under U.S. law, once they declare it's a coup, they're required by U.S. law to terminate all humanitarian and military assistance. So that could put into jeopardy the fate of its two bases, especially that drone base, which is used for the region of the Sahel to go after and fight extremists. That would have to be shut down, and that's about 1,100 U.S. military personnel we're talking about. They don't want to do that. In fact, it's being suggested the U.S. may try to find a modus vivendi, in other words, a way to somehow live and work with the junta. In other words, the ultimate decision is this. Do we actually come to terms with the fact that this is the junta that we have to recognize as the ruling power of Niger, with the condition that they will be planning for a transition to civilian rule? And that may be the path that it's headed towards right now.
Indeed, still a fluid situation, no doubt, and we'll see how this pans out. Karl Bostic, Arise International correspondent, many thanks for the update on Niger.